Hello and welcome to Digital Publishing Lessons from Brown University's Born Digital Scholarly Publishing Institute at Toward Radical Imagination. My name is Vanesa Evers, the Digital Publishing Librarian at the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library, and I'm moderating today's session. Before I introduce each panelist, I'd like to remind attendees we'll be following the Digital Library Federation Code of Conduct, which we'll place in the chat. Audience members, if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your Zoom app, and feel free to chat with each other using the chat function. We will turn to questions and answers at the 40-minute mark of this 50-minute session. And now I will introduce the panel speakers by name, title, and organization. To view their full bios, please click the speakers page in the Zoom events lobby. Please welcome TaKeia N. Anthony, PhD, Interim Dean at Whitney Young Honors and Graduate Studies, Kentucky State University. Ashley Robertson, Preston, PhD, Assistant Professor of History at Howard University. Marco Robinson, PhD, Associate Professor of History and Assistant Director of the Ruth J. Simmons Center for Race and Justice at Prairie View A&M University. Tanya L. Reese Rogers, PhD, Associate Professor of Literature and Drama, Director of the W.E.B. Du Bois Honor Program at Fisk University. So welcome, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming today. I did want to start off the conversation with you guys each briefly sharing your experience with the Digital Publishing Institute at Brown University and how it relates to the work at your institution. And I'll start with you, Dr. Anthony.
Well, thank you. First, thanks for having me. My experience was amazing, I will have to say. This felt like part two for me of digital humanities. I was a digital humanities fellow at Duke University. I was an NCCU Duke University fellowship prior to coming to Kentucky State University. So I was somewhat familiar with some of the platforms. And the question that I always had at that institute was, so how do we publish? How do we make this count towards tenure and, towards everything? And so it was a blessing to come now to the Brown University Institute because it answered those questions for me and it gave those platforms. So this was a really, really enriching program for me. And then to get feedback from so many of my colleagues who were there and asking some of the hard questions, about research, that was very enriching as well. Being at Brown University, that was my first time on the campus, and it's a beautiful campus, beautiful library. It was just amazing. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity and grateful to have my questions answered as far as digital publishing with the digital humanities with this institute.
And Dr. Preston, I'd like to go to you next because I know this idea of the panel really came from some conversation that you've had. So if you can share your experience at the Institute as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Excited to talk about our time at Brown. Unlike Dr. Anthony, I am very new to this digital humanities world, but I've been at Howard. This is my second year at Howard, and I teach public history. And we would really like to bring more focus on digital humanities to Howard University, specifically to our public history program. I believe that digital humanities is where all of this is going. And so that was one of my main interests, was not just my project, but also how to enrich the curriculum for our students at Howard. And so I was really taking a lot of notes during this process and really thinking about what this looked like in the classroom. But my project, The Fierce Activism of Mary McLeod Bethune, it's really an extension of my work on Mrs. Bethune. My second book on her, Mary McLeod Bethune, the Pan-Africanist, it will be published next month, May 16th. And so it looks at her international work. And so I've been thinking about, how do I get more people to understand Mrs. Bethune? She's one of those folks that was very influential during her lifetime, but for some reason, she has not really been written on enough. And so as I am writing these books, I am also thinking about how to expand her name in this digital world also. And so I thought about, for this project, really bringing out some of those writings, like her writings in the Pittsburgh Courier and the Chicago Defender. I want those things to be a part of the project, and also her voice. There are several voice recordings of Mrs. Bethune, and a lot of these things are locked up in archives or, in places where a lot of the general public may not be able to go, may not even realize that they're there. And so I would like to really bring the archive and bring some of that material to the people in this digital project. So a lot of different things going on, wanting to teach this, but also wanting to do this project. And that is what really made me interested in this institute. And the format of the institute also was extremely helpful as a mom and a wife. 3 weeks, being somewhere for 3 weeks just was not going to work for me. So I can talk about that later, but.
Thank you. And Dr. Robinson, if you'd like to answer, and then we'll go to Dr. Rogers.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I'd like to thank the organizers for this virtual event. We certainly appreciate this platform to talk about the great work that's going on and that collaboration that we started over this summer. It was a really good synergy amongst our group in terms of our being able to join energies and to have a meeting of minds around digital publishing. All of us we didn't know much about each other's work. And as we began to talk during that week, unpackaging, the things that we've been doing, and the majority of the persons on the panel now, we do a lot of archival work. So when we saw that, we were automatically attracted to each other and what we were doing in terms of approach. But as it relates to the work that I've been doing at Prairie View A&M University, we have a very robust digitization program that's going on right now. We have a couple of NEH grants that we are working on to digitize our agricultural collection, also a number of our Negro education teacher collections, which Prairie View was the home for Black education, administrative home for Black public education in Texas during the Jim Crow era. And so my project is centered in that agricultural program in which we offered extension services to Black and brown farmers during the Jim Crow era. And so when this opportunity came about through Allison Levy at Brown, who valiantly leads that team, it was a great chance for me to go and be introduced to platforms like Fulcrum so that we could begin to start a process of thinking about how we approach this. And I'm very much like Dr. Preston and Dr. Anthony too. This was uncharted waters for us in many respects in terms of on our campuses and being able to connect with individuals who could get the legs up and going on the table, which we're trying to build this work on.
And thank you, Dr. Robertson. And Dr. Rogers, would you like to share what your experience was like?
Absolutely. I too would like to thank the organizers for this wonderful panel, and it's so good to see my colleagues again from the summer experience. For me, Brown was especially useful because it really demystified this digital publication process. And I have been long interested in publishing digitally. I've been doing some work on the side, and as a member of the Fisk faculty, we are, full steam ahead in digital humanities in particular. And so my work is really on Black female playwrights. And because my work is in theater and with playwrights, it was important to me that my books have a digital platform so that I can show clips from these actual plays, because the playwriting format is not meant to be read only in script form. It's meant to be seen. And so having a digital platform means that I'm able to upload scenes from plays, video clips that take us to advanced educational opportunities that relate to the plays. And so digital was everything for me. So not only did this process really demystify and the whole digital publishing process, but we learned about the many platforms. We sat with experts who are already publishing digitally. We met with publishers, university press folks who are interested in our work. And so this was really just a first of its kind sort of national training program that I think for all of us has expanded our opportunities going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. And you kind of go into one of the questions that I have around new platforms that you guys use during the Institute. And I'm really interested in knowing which platforms y'all used and what were the best fits for the platforms with the projects that you have and why. And how was it learning new platforms that you were not familiar with and the support that you got in using those at the Institute and beyond?
Well, since I was already talking, I'll just proceed
Thank you.
for a little bit. So we learned about Fulcrum, as Dr. Robinson talked about. We did a little bit with WordPress. We learned, what are some of the others that we engaged? All of them were really quite useful. And the thing that we especially paid attention to was the differences between them. Some of them allowed for more content. Some of them allowed for more sort of a constellation sort of organization. Some of them were more linear. Some allowed for huge works, 70,000 words and larger. Some were better designed for smaller texts. And so we just had a ball kind of learning which ones suited us best. And I think we have a good sense, each of us, of what might work for our projects.
Right. If I can jump in, if that's okay. I know two of the other platforms that I was kind of going back and forth with was Scalar. I really liked the Scalar, but then the more I talked to my colleagues about it, I realized, and I'll get into this later about the challenges, I really realized that it was going to be more challenging, to present my research via the Scalar platform. So I think Manifold is the platform that I will choose moving forward. And there's still some challenges there, but I think it best suits my research because it will allow me to have a lot of the traditional writing that's there and then plug in the digital as I go, opposed to it being more the digital side. Like Dr. Rogers was saying, there are platforms that have large bandwidth that you can download a lot of the digital and kind of play around with it. And I really kind of want to insert the digital into the traditional text, if that makes sense. And so I'll get into more of that when we talk about the challenges, because that was one of my main challenges, with this digital project and looking how to digitally publish. But I think Scalar and Manifold, to add to Dr. Rogers, are two additional platforms that were really interesting.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. Dr. Preston or Robertson, would you guys like to chime in on any of the platforms that you guys use?
Yeah, I was really drawn to a project that we were introduced to by Matt Delmont. The project was Black Quotidian, and he had a lot of digitized Black newspapers there. A lot of content as far as putting those newspapers into historical perspective. And that project was actually done using Scalar. So I was drawn to it because of, how well his project turned out. But I'm still not sure exactly what platform I'm going to use for my project. I did start kind of playing around with PubPub. And so I'm still trying to figure that out. I've been focusing more on the actual content and what's going to go, writing the narrative. And I'm hoping that I'll get some funding or something, be able to work with folks who can more so take care of the technical side of it. So I've just been kind of getting an introduction to the platforms.
Thank you.
I like to say again, that week was very informative in terms of those platforms and being introduced to those platforms. We still have Google Drive folders that we have access to go back to look at the information that we were provided during that week. But I'm kind of stuck between Scalar and Fulcrum in terms of which one I wanted to use as a platform for my project. And so during that week, what was very helpful was they brought actual authors in. They brought Dr. Bashir in, and his book recently came out. It's been doing really well. And so that was very informative in terms of our seeing his project and its evolution, and even how it's now published in the public domain, and to see it flourish. And so what we received in terms of experience during that week, in terms of the front side, of actually being introduced to the stuff, but even behind the curtain with the technical side, I know a whole lot more about, you know, the platforms than I did prior to coming, which on my campus, we don't have a digital humanities center. So that was very important for me to go back and have as much information as I could, and to even now have opportunities to get in other digital publishing programs, which Dr. Levy has been in contact with all of us about. And so it's a relationship that we built that we want to continue to build on.
Thank you so much for that. And as a digital publishing librarian, it's really important for me to show different faculty, and I work and train folks in WordPress and different programs, press books and all of that. So it's really exciting to hear the different programs that you guys are using Scalar. I didn't hear anyone say Omeka, but maybe that was some of the things that you guys looked at too, I'm sure. Dr. Anthony?
Yes, so we did look at Omeka, and I'm familiar with Omeka from the first fellowship that I had. And so I just knew that it wouldn't fit for this project. But I do use Omeka in my classrooms. My students are doing Omeka digital projects right now in my special topics course. And so they're using that, and the ISRI Night Lab story maps and all of that, which are different platforms. Well, we talked about Omeka here, but the story map and the timeline and all of that are different platforms that we kind of touched on a little in this project with this fellowship, but not so much so because of the, you know, looking at publishing compared to just a project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Dr. Anthony, you were kind of leaning towards some of the challenges. So I would definitely like I'm going to ask this question to the whole group and would ask that you start the answer. But did you face any challenges during the Institute? And if so, how did you navigate the challenges? So the learning curve with new platforms, balancing work responsibilities with deliverables from the Institute, possible lack of support at your home institute, and any other challenges that you guys might have faced. And also, I do want to say, too, that you guys I'm mixing another question, but we know that it's not free to use these platforms. And so how do you maintain the financial support if you are being introduced and having a new account created for these projects?
Right. Well, I'll start with the challenges. I had two main challenges. I just entered into my role as an administrator, as a dean, when this fellowship came about. And so I am trying to navigate how to, you know, be a dean, how to build a program, the honors program from scratch, as well as maintain our graduate studies program. And so I was in between meetings, one headphone in on one end, sitting in a meeting, another meeting headphone in another ear, and just trying to, you know, navigate everything. And then after like the first day, I finally said, look, I need a timeout. I need to focus, you know, on this institution or on this institute, because it's going to bring value to Kentucky State University. And so I was able to get my excuse from class, you know, from the provost and the president's cabinet to really dive deep, you know, with this and to be able to pay more attention. So that was really a challenge for the first day, maybe 2 days. And like Dr. Robertson said, we don't have a digital humanities center or anything. And so trying to convince administration that digital humanities is important, and, you know, just the humanities in general, but then digital humanities, you know, is important. It was a struggle at first, but I think they finally caught on to it once I was able to show them how this could be beneficial, especially to our graduate studies program. And so I'm looking to write policy that will allow for our graduate students to incorporate digital projects into their thesis. I think a lot of our students are scared to write that large scale, thesis paper. And so I think we're having these conversations with the provost and the president's cabinet to be able to say, how can we incorporate digital projects into their research, and then cut down maybe on the writing or incorporate it some kind of way. And so I am currently writing that policy so that we can incorporate our digital projects into our graduate studies program as the dean. So the challenge came with the benefit. The second challenge was to kind of reimagine writing. Coming from the history field, a history background, you make a statement and then you explain it in 10 pages. It's very detailed. Most of our books are 200 to 300 pages sometimes, very detailed information. And so as I was writing, and this is my second book I'm writing, and I realized that, I have 250 pages, worth of work. And when I got to the Institute, they said that's way too much. So now one of my challenges is like relearning how to tell the story, relearning, what details go in, what details come out. How can I kind of, narrow it down and then put in the digital side of it so that it tells the story, similar to what Dr. Rogers was saying. Let the digital, information tell more of the story opposed to writing it in a manuscript. So I'm still learning that, trying to unlearn, my dissertation process. That's kind of hard. It's been ingrained, in us for so long. And I'm sure all of the panelists can attest, to that process. So yeah, that's another challenge.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. Dr. Preston, Dr. Rogers, and Dr. Robertson, you guys definitely feel free to bring in some of the challenges that you guys encountered.
Well, I say for me, again, it was the tech support. I was doing an assessment all that week of the phenomenal job of what we had at our fingertips at Brown, and then going back to my campus, again, how was I going to have, that type of technical support? And so I've maintained relationships and stayed in contact with people that I know that could support me in terms of things on the back end, the tech side of everything. The other side, I had the same challenges that Dr. Anthony had in terms of I had a manuscript that I started, and I have to transfer that now into a form that's compatible to a digital platform. And so in terms of those pictures and multimedia things that I was going to use, but also the narrative and the text, making it shorter so that it would fit, the platform. And so that's a challenge that I'm facing also. But more importantly, looking at how I could build capacity on my campus, as Dr. Anthony mentioned, to make make people rally around the digital humanities, because this is a burgeoning field in higher ed and academia, and I wanted my university to be on the cusp of it also. And so I've been championing that the best way that I can, and my students are doing projects in my research courses around that, but also other colleagues who are doing similar work. We've been joining together to get stuff off the ground that where we can kind of create a support system around that, and that will be the foundation for building like a center, and so we've been making sure that we keep moving forward with that. But all of that goes back to the things that I learned at the Institute, which gave me more insight to share and to help impact my campus. And so it's been absolutely transformative in terms of what I've been able to share with colleagues, staff, and students for my campus, and projecting our way forward.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Dr. Preston, I saw that you unmuted for a second. Do you have any challenges you'd like to bring in?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge was time. Also, the work-life balance was a challenge. When you think about committing 3 weeks to anything in the summer, most of us have the summer off, but we're always doing something during the summer. It's like it's off, but it's like, okay, it's my time off to write, or it's my time off to follow up on another project that I've already been working on. And so for me, I just, I thought it was really important to make this investment of time. But it was also a challenge. I'm a mom, my kid is running around. And I feel like Brown did a really good job of, first of all, offering a hybrid option. When we look at a lot of the institutes that happen in the summer, 3 or 4 weeks, I could not have done this if it was 3 or 4 weeks at Brown. It would have been out of the cards for me to be away from my family for that long. Also, during the time that we were having the sessions it was like 2 weeks at home and then 1 week in person. And during those 2 weeks, if you had a doctor's appointment or you missed something, they recorded the sessions. It was easy to kind of jump back in. And I really appreciate just how they worked with us and how they were flexible, to us being at home and still having our lives going on. And also the timing of most of the sessions was kind of like in the afternoon. And that worked really well because I could kind of end my day early and then hop on the sessions. Lots of breaks, for it to be online, sometimes we sit in these Zoom sessions and it's like, oh gosh, I'm going to be on Zoom for 4 hours. The time went by really quickly because of how it was structured. It was a presentation and then maybe a 15-minute break. And then, we talked back and forth. So I just think the format worked well. And, a lot of times these things can be really intimidating when you think about being somewhere online for several hours, but I really enjoyed it. And I really learned a lot. So just trying to balance life in the summertime in general was the major challenge for me.
So I want to just comment on what my colleagues have said here. One, I think for me, I had a different scope issue. I was working with about 45 pages that I wanted to scale up, but not scale it up too high. And so what I realized is the digital platform is perfect for these sort of smaller projects, the ones that you can walk through really quickly, bring it from project idea to completion in a short amount of time, make it user-friendly for readers, for site users, et cetera. And so I'm doing a project right now that came as a result of this Brown Institute. And it's a Black Books interactive project. And I'm working with a really short manuscript. A colleague and I are building this together. And so I'm learning that this digital format makes for really nice, short, sweet, but intense publications that you can sort of move along quickly. And I think to speak to Dr. Robinson's point, that's really beneficial for our campuses. That increases output. It makes the work easy to access. Our students are less inclined to read these longer texts these days, more inclined to type in a web address. And so, meeting our constituents who are our students where they are is fantastic. So for me, it was scaling up to a shorter work, but something that was also great. And I also want to talk about Dr. Anthony's point. She mentioned administrative responsibilities. All 4 of us are in, administrative roles in addition to our teaching loads. We also are mostly juggling family at home. And so, the idea of digital publication was probably for some of us a little intimidating, but Dr. Allison Levy made this smooth as can be. I think we should also mention Dr. Warren Harding. He was also spectacular. Cosette was spectacular in making this user-friendly, schedule accommodating, and plain. So my short project now is in WordPress, which couldn't be more streamlined.
Thank you for that, Dr. Rogers. I would like, I'm sorry, Dr. Anthony, did you have something that you wanted to say? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say congratulations.
Well, and congratulations to everybody that's working on their first, second book, these projects through the Institute with that support and also just new ideas. I kind of want to, this is going to be one of the last questions before we get into the Q&A session, but I wanted to combine two questions around financial support and aside from the financial support. So one looking at and I just want to read. So in looking at the Institute's aims, one aim they mentioned is to support scholars from less resourced institutions. So we are aware that there are costs associated with resources, platforms, programs, and continued education for use of technologies you may have learned at the Institute, et cetera. So how did the Institute answer this possible gap for future support? I know Dr. Robertson said that you continue to get some tech support. So what did that look like? How did you feel well equipped to continue your work and support for any new subscriptions obtained through the Institute? And then aside from that financial support, how are you supported by the librarian staff or the library staff and those folks there, like myself at AUC, but how are you guys supported by your home institute at the library?
Well, I work very intimately with the archivists at our university. So I already had a developed relationship there. But the other layer of that was this summer, some of the other programs across the country with the University of Michigan and other digital presses that Dr. Levin introduced us to. We sought out, there were opportunities to publish digitally. So like, say for instance, there was a call through Princeton for HBCUs to have a publisher. There's a project that Dr. Levy is working on right now that I'm a part of that's teaming HBCU staff in the library with HBCU faculty who want to work on digital publishing. And so that library staff will take care of the tech part of it. And of course, the faculty person would do the narrative part of it in terms of getting the monograph off the ground in terms of putting it together. And so this is absolutely transforming the terrain of higher education, having access to this. I mean, you know, the old adage, publish or perish, you know, we understand the ambiguities around that, but now in terms of the realities of that, there are life ropes that people are handing out that we can grab onto to help us to get that done. And so this program was phenomenal in opening doors for that. You know, other people who've been asking, you know, you participated in the Brown program and other schools that are trying to do the same thing up to replicate, you know, that effort. And so that's very beneficial to HBCUs because, you know, these are partnership opportunities, collaboration opportunities, but more important, this is opportunity for us to create knowledge too, in terms of putting our stories forward and others being able to learn about, you know, our spaces.
May I jump in? I just want to reiterate what Dr. Robertson said. We're also in the process at Kentucky State University with the same project with Dr. Levy, connecting our library staff with the faculty member, myself, you know, to bring forth digital projects, digital humanities to the university for workshops and to highlight. And I think this is an amazing partnership. Not just a partnership, but a partnership with an Ivy League institution, you know, to be able to highlight the work that our faculty, you know, can do in the workshops. And then, of course, I want to extend that further, like I mentioned again, to graduate studies to make sure that our students then become familiar and possibly be able to do something on the student side, a journal or something that we can do. And we're still in the talks of that for our graduate students. So I think that's extremely important. And similar to Dr. Robinson, I've had several faculty members and colleagues at Kentucky State to ask me about, you know, digital humanities. Some of the students who are doing projects in my class are talking about their projects in other classes and saying, hey, can we do this project in your class? This is what Dr. Anthony's doing, and then they'll come to me and say, hey, what project are you working on? What are you doing with the students? Because they're interested and they're excited and they want me to do this in my class, but I don't know anything about it. And so to be able to, host those small workshops and like Dr. Robertson said, possibly create a center so that we can, have a digital humanities center. We are the only public HBCU in the state of Kentucky. So, I mean, that is great. And we service mostly the Midwest. A lot of our students come from the Chicago, Detroit, all parts of Ohio, Dayton, Toledo, Cleveland, as well as the state of Kentucky. So servicing, that area is extremely important as one of the few HBCUs. We do have HBCUs in Ohio, but to be able to be that hub, in this region of the United States is extremely important. And to know that this would have been birthed, from attending the Institute at Brown University. I mean, it's just extremely important. And again, I just say thank you. And I look forward to continue to work and to grow and develop it because it's definitely needed. And our students are extremely excited about it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Anthony. Dr. Preston or Dr. Rogers, would you guys like to share and let me know? I know that was a big, long question, so let me know if you want me to repeat any parts of that.
I agree with all of that. And I think we were talking about funding. We had a whole session during this institute on funding. I mean, where we sat with, the provost and visiting professor in Africana Studies at Brown University, and she talked about her own sort of in progress digital manuscript on contemporary slave past. This sat with, an associate professor of history from the University of California, Santa Cruz, who talked about her own sort of in-press publication with Stanford. And through these two people, for instance, we talked about funding and how you can pitch an idea, propose an idea, integrate your narrative with your design, and then funding opportunities ongoing. And I know one of the things we sort of alluded to that maybe we should touch on a little more is this idea that we have an ongoing resource still that was compiled across this institute that we can log into at any moment that has funding opportunities listed with deadlines and resources, that has places where we could publish digitally, that has a listing of university presses that are friendly toward digital projects, and endless other resources. So I think many of us were also concerned about subvention. And we had sessions on that too, how to fund the fees, right? And lastly, I think this is so important for reimagining collaborations with libraries. I am at my core a literature professor. And while I love this digital space, I am so wedded to books. And so just the idea that this whole digital process reunites us with our librarians and our libraries, particularly the ones on our HBCU campuses that are homes to these incredible archives that we are now bringing to life, that we are now helping to preserve through this digital space that we're making accessible to the world because they can type in a web address and access our beautiful archives, I think is enormously important going forward and for the longevity, continued longevity of these HBCUs. And this work, I think, is integral with our librarians and our libraries. And so, we just thank Brown for hosting us, for introducing us to these platforms, for bringing all of us together, and for the ongoing work that we'll all do.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Thank you for that. Dr. Preston, do you want to bring anything into the conversation? This is going to be the last contribution, and then I'm going to go to Q&A because we already have one really great question in the Q&A.
Okay, I second what Dr. Rogers said about the guide, the resource guide that we have. I mean, everything that you could think of was in that guide. Like, I'm still using it, still going back to it with trying to develop courses and all of those things. Like, it has been really amazing. They've also shared grant opportunities with us. I recently applied for something that they sent. And I just think with all of the different things that we have going on, sometimes you don't seek those opportunities out. So it's always good to be reminded of what's out there. And also just the ongoing relationships, you know, the check-ins that we've been doing to kind of keep us focused on these digital projects. Even when we go back to our institutions and we're doing all of these other things, you know, they've kind of been helping to keep us on track. And then the last thing I would say is just some of the relationships, the folks that they introduced us to, being able to sit down and have lunch with the program officer for the NEH Office of Digital Humanities. That was a great relationship that started right at Brown. So I'm really excited about what's to come. And as everyone else has said, really thankful that we had this chance to work with Brown, and hoping that it will also help us to continue more partnerships between our HBCUs and Brown in the future.
Thank y'all so much for this. I really appreciated having this conversation with y'all. I'm going to go and also give you guys an opportunity. If you want to put any of your projects in the chat, you can definitely do that. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Q&A. This first question is kind of around bridging students with the bridging or ways that you've bridged digital tools and platforms with the classroom. And I know, Dr. Anthony, you were talking about this a little bit. And so this person would like to know, what does that ongoing support look like when students are interested in the digital projects that you're working on? Do you have librarians come into the classroom? Do you take them to the library? Are you showing them how to use these platforms? I know one school I worked at, they had a student had to create an Omeka site. So how are you guys kind of bringing these platforms in your classroom to where the future of these folks are also getting the tools that you guys are learning as well?
Yeah, for my class, it's Africana Studies is special topics. So I've got 30 students who are doing their own independent research in Africana Studies. And so I introduced them to Omeka. I introduced them to, because some students are interested in public history. And so they're looking to do a museum exhibit. That's what they're looking to use the Omeka site for, to create a museum exhibit. And it's coming together very, very well. I will say the challenge with that is Omeka is one of the platforms that costs. And so you're able to use the one free trial, with the website, with one email address, that one free trial. So, and they are aware of this. And so I tell them, once you finish this project, if you want to do another project like this, you either need to pay or you need to create a new email address so that you can continue to do it, free, because right now we don't have the resources to get a subscription at Kentucky State. And so that is something that is in the discussion with the provost and the president's office, but things are moving slow. When it comes to doing the different subscriptions and having the resources for that, and then creating, of course, the bandwidth to house all of these different projects so that they can be shown to the public, is another challenge that we have at Kentucky State. So the students are excited, and they do understand that this one awesome project is the one awesome project that they're going to do, and that if they want to do another awesome project on Omeka, then we have to kind of figure out how that can happen. So a lot of the students chose to use the storyline and the story map and the timeline and story map, because those are free platforms. And so if you go to Night Lab, You can find the timeline there, the story maps. And so I have one student, and she's doing an amazing research comparing Black Wall Street of Tulsa, Oklahoma, to the Black Wall Street of Durham, North Carolina. And so she's able to go in and map these two locations and talk about, the main streets and the main businesses that are there. And in her narrative, then she's able to talk about how the history of it. And then, of course, the destruction and the effects that the destruction of these two Black Wall Streets have had. And these are undergraduate students. And so when I go back to think, I said, you do know that you have a dissertation topic. And if you are to continue to build on this, and Dr. Preston, I kind of threw your name out there. I said, if you want to go to Howard University, I know someone who's in public history, United States history, that can help you build on this project, and so that's why I think it's super important that we have the policies written at our institutions that support students who want to come in and do these digital projects for their thesis and then move it towards a dissertation. And that's something I have to definitely say. North Carolina Central University has that policy that's there. And I've been able to sit on committees, thesis committees, with students who have been able to use the story map and the timeline. And they've used the Google, they've used the ISRI. There's different types, that are out there. And it's really to the platform of the student, what they choose. And so there are HBCUs that do have that policy. But for those of us who don't, it's very important that we write those policies in to support the students, because they are super, super, super excited about doing these hands-on projects. And they come to my office hours and it's just amazing. I'm like, wow, I have students in office hours really wanting to talk about scholarly work, and so it's been amazing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony, for sharing that with us. We do only have 3 minutes before the session ends. And so either we have one more question that came in. And so I'm trying to see maybe if everybody can give like a 1-minute answer to kind of close us out, either if you want to talk about students in your classroom or answering this question. Somebody said, thank you, Dr. LaTanya Reese Rogers, for recognizing the importance of librarians and libraries and their potential role in digital scholarship. How can we bring greater synergy for partnerships and collaboration, such as relationship with Brown and HBCUs? And so maybe if people want to kind of share, and we got another really, I think somebody's thanking you guys as well too, but maybe it's anybody, if we want to give like 1 minute, maybe as we close, but kind of thinking about how we can continue to build these really strong relationships between institutions that have the funds and HBCUs.
Well, I think it's really important that we include librarians in our courses. And so every semester, it's really important to me that I bring in the librarian and I have that person or those multiple people talk to the students about the possibilities. And as much as, as a literature professor, I love words, I'm also very understanding that our students are digital. And so it's a key partnership between classrooms, librarians, and libraries. And I think, just looking for opportunities and fostering that is to all of our benefit.
I like to resound what Dr. Rogers just said, that all of my work, even my publications, about 2 or 3 of them are collaborative publications with our archivists at Prairie View. So I say that in terms of interdisciplinary approaches to research, we have to widen our lens in terms of our approaches to it. When I get the archivists involved, when I get the librarians involved in the work, students have a support mechanism that they can lean on as they're going and they're doing primary research. And in the humanities, in the social sciences, we primarily do primary research. And so when they have relationships with these individuals, they are more prone to go to the library, to go to the archive. And when they return to class, that's the laboratory in which they can come back and talk about these things, and we can begin to shape their ideas. And so that is an intricate part of the matriculation at Prairie View right now, that we've been bridging classroom, the archive, even to the work that we're doing in the community. And I think that this is an approach that's going to be most beneficial, particularly to to historically Black spaces and how we're connected to community and addressing the issues that are impacting our communities. And so I like to say, well, with Dr. Foreman, Dr. Preston, and Dr. Anthony, with the phenomenal work that y'all are doing, and to continue to do what y'all are doing. And so, because this is an opportunity, but more or less, this is a platform that we do need to take advantage of. And I'm very appreciative to Brown for providing us with this opportunity.
All right, thank you, Dr. Robertson. Dr. Preston, would you like to add anything to this?
No, I just want to say thanks for this space today. Thanks for this, these 2 days of amazing panels and sessions. The fact that it has been free for people to attend. I've been seeing folks, and I've shared it on Twitter and on social media. So I just want to thank you all for putting this out there for folks, and not making it, not putting it somewhere where folks can't access it, making it accessible and making it free. I think that's really, really big. So thanks for this.
Thank you, Dr. Preston. And one last thing just came in the chat, and I think that it's not so much as a question, but maybe kind of an idea is, so college students have already been introduced to digital knowledge, and we know that young kids are too, with iPads. They can teach us how to do a lot of things at 5 or 10. And so they said, not sure if this is a question, if it's relevant or not, but how can this be introduced to middle school, high school students? And so I think that this kind of goes back to a previous conversation that we had a session earlier today with trying to get folks interested in librarianship before college. And so how can we get folks interested in this type of research and bringing your digital ideas with your research at a younger age? And so maybe if anybody, they said it's okay if we go 1 minute over. So if anybody wants to kind of share any ideas how you can introduce younger kids to the same thing so that when they get to college age, they have more ways to create. Go ahead.
We don't have time to cover this right now, but I have several projects going on, one with the National Humanities Center, one with the University of Texas, that I have resources that we're creating to deal with different topics in American history. If you reach out to me, get my email address from the site, and reach out to me, I'll make sure that I get that info to you.
And just to add to that, I think it's important that we make sure that we publish our work and maybe incorporate it into the curriculum for our middle school and high. So then they're familiar with using the platform. So then when it's time for them to create on the platform, and when they come to the college level, it'll be easier because they'll be familiar with it. And it just makes me think about Dr. Preston's work and her research. If we were to incorporate Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune into the curriculum and Dr. Preston's research, then they'll be familiar with working with that kind of stuff. So I think that's one direction.
All right, thank y'all so much. We're going to go ahead and let everybody go to the next session, or a break before the next session. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate your time and everything you had to say. If you're interested in learning more about everybody, please check out their full bios. And see you guys. Have a great day.